Hi, everyone. I think we're going to kick off now. So welcome to this webinar where we're launching a market assessment that looked at accelerating innovation in smart energy and industrial decarbonisation. That was commissioned by the UN's Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and delivered by KPMG. Just to give you a bit of wider context, this week we've been launching two other market assessments as well. Some of you may have come to that as well. So we had a launch of a critical minerals market assessment in developing countries, as well as a clean hydrogen innovation market assessment in developing countries. So all three of these market assessments are now available on the A2D Facility website, which is the Accelerate to Demonstrate facility within UNIDO, and we'll give you a little bit of background on that in this webinar as well. The A2D facility itself is funded by the UK government's Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and was the funder of this market assessment as well. So welcome everyone to this launch. So we recently did a presentation at COP29 to sort of formally launch this a few weeks ago, and now this webinar is really a chance to go into a bit more detail. But of course, the full report is available on the website. It's about 200 or 300 pages, so if you want the detail, do go to the report. Here we're going to mainly present the high-level key findings as well. So in terms of the agenda, on the next slide. I'm going to soon pass over to my colleague Yi Zhang, who leads our smart energy and industrial decarbonisation parts in UNIDO's A2D facility. And then Adela Roszkowski from KPMG, who's a senior manager for advisory services there, will present for half an hour the key findings. And we'll also have a chance for Q&A as well. So because of the size of the meeting, there we have a function for Q&A. So if you'll see the tab on your screens. If you want to submit a question, put it through the Q&A tab, and then we will try and answer as many questions as we can. If we get lots of questions, we will tend to go for the summary questions that can speak to a few different questions, and any that we can't get to, feel free to send us an email to the A2D facility mailbox, which is just a2dfacility@unido.org, and we'll get back to you with answers to those questions. So without further ado, I just should actually quickly introduce myself as well. So I'm Peter Warren, and I'm heading up UNIDO's A2D facility. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague E, who's going to give a bit more background to this market assessment, but also UNIDO as well. Over to you, E.
Thank you, Peter. Can you go next slide, Carl? Okay, not showing from my side. Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Yi, and I'm working at the A2D facility in UNIDO as a project coordinator or thematic lead for the smart energy and industry decarbonization, these two thematic areas. And today I'm going to moderate first for this market assessment international webinar for a big introduction of how we are going to run the session a bit about UNIDO's and the A2D facilities function. So if you can see in the screen, UNIDO actually it has an advanced role in advancing clean energy innovation. We have our priorities, mainly three: supporting sustainable supply chains, limiting climate breakdown, and also ending hunger. And we have a very long history about doing technical assistance projects, especially in our big technical cooperation departments. And we have also very rich for experience doing capacity building, supporting different member states and other developing countries. And we have involved a lot in the investment innovation fundings. We also collaborate with different stakeholders to form enhanced partnerships, no matter with public sectors and private sectors. And we also lead on policy dialogues in the areas as the three core priorities, but also other UNIDO mandates. Sorry, I'm just going to introduce a bit first to some key initiatives in the thematic areas of relevance. The first one is the smart energy. We have Global Alliance on AI for Industry and Manufacturing, which was announced in 2022 in Shanghai through the World Artificial Intelligence Conference. And actually, we have a main focus in smart energy in our A2D facility. We have options of no matter supporting the developing countries with direct grants on smart energy intelligent technologies, but also doing knowledge sharing and other collaborations. And we also have 4IR strategic framework. Before this role, I was working in the digital transformation and the artificial intelligence strategy division. And we have this dialogues took place earliest in 2021. For the industry decarbonization, we have key UNIDO initiatives like the IDDI. I think a lot of people, if heard about UNIDO, also heard about that one. It's a long history initiative launched by the UNIDO and the Clean Energy Ministry. It's a coalition of governments and working with private sectors to create enabling environment for heavy industry sectors. And also us for A2D facility, we have, like as I just mentioned, we're providing grants to the relevant energy intensive sectors in developing countries. Also, we are engaging with different knowledge projects and communications. Because we are I'm going to introduce a bit more about how we do that with A2D facility. Then we also have like global matchmaking platform supporting developing countries moving forward for the industry decarbonization agenda. And this is a new platform launched recently, 2023, December 5th. Together with the Partnership for Net Zero Industries, and we have the capability of delivering support on the company level and also initial list of feasible industry decarbonization technology solutions for heavy industry. And also we have potential to support more bankable proposals for financing. And we have engagement with Breakthrough Agenda together with World Bank and IRENA, developing mapping exercises of financial and technical initiatives on clean hydrogen. And also because it has a focus on heavy industries like steel, cement, chemicals. We have also Industry Decarbonization Hub, which is a very collaborative platform organized by Brazil and the UK to mobilize and coordinate international assistance. So I will leave it there because the time that I were going to introduce the most important thing today for the overview of the accelerated demonstrator facility, which is what we are doing here for the general scope of the market assessment. And then because of as you can see, the 34% of emissions reductions are needed according to the IEA research by 2050. And we come out of questioning how do we actually helping the market to commercializing clean energy solutions, especially in four thematic areas: critical minerals, clean hydrogen, smart energy, and industry decarbonization. That's why under this consideration, the A2D facility is funded by the UK government. It's a big program, around $80 million, funded by the DESNAS and the UK DESNAS, and initially operates from April 2023 and until 2029 March. This project we are covering grant supports are size from 1 to 5 million per project have to be covered within these four thematic areas. And also we had already our first funding call early this year in July 2024. The SDGs focus we are mainly thinking about is the climate action, no poverty, and also industry innovation and infrastructure. So as Peter just mentioned, we already have our market assessment published during COP29 recently. So you can see all the leaflets and the summaries from our official website, including the whole report and also the summary reports. And you can also access like necessary documents through this QR code. So to allow more time for the May presenter, from KPMG for a market assessment, I will stop here and I will give the floor, Kathleen, to Adela from KPMG Austria.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. Caroline, if we could move to the next slide, that would be wonderful. So you already learned about what the A2D facility is about. So now we would like to present you the key findings of our market assessment on accelerating technology innovation in smart energy and industrial decarbonization in developing countries. The findings that I'm presenting were, of course, not derived by myself. I had great support from colleagues from our international network, both from the Decarb Hub, but also from our International Development Assistance Services team. One of those team members is actually here with me today, Ruba Amarine. She will be presenting the section on smart energy, since this is her area of expertise. But again, many other colleagues have contributed to this work. We only have half an hour. As he already showed you, you can find the full report, which has close to 200 pages on the internet. If you're keen to read it, we would be very happy if you do. But also that means I will not be able to go into all the details today, but try to cover the most important key findings. All right, let's start with a little bit of background setting, why this is important. So on the one hand, there is still a big need for developing countries to enhance their economic situation. As we can see, the 141 countries on the OECD's list of official development assistance recipients, they make up 83% of the global population. But as of today, they basically account for 36% of global GDP. So a really significant mismatch. On top of that, they account for 63% of global emissions, and this figure is on the rise. It is on the rise because, of course, the global population is growing, but also electricity demand is projected to double in developing countries. And this electricity demand is, of course, required to ensure that economic growth can be achieved. And this is still necessary because while in some parts of the world, there is a significant decline in poverty levels, overall, the absolute number of people living in poverty has steadily increased over time throughout the decades. So there is a need for poverty levels to drop across the globe. At the same time, there is a need to ensure that the development of industrialization and job creation is done in a sustainable way. The energy systems in developing countries provide an opportunity for transformation, but at the same time require investments in infrastructure and innovation. And while there has been a significant investment in legacy infrastructure, some countries still see significant lack of investment in clean energy solutions. Next, please. Now, a little bit about the market assessment itself. Actually, it consists of two market assessments, as we have two thematic areas, smart energy and industrial decarbonization. And these market assessments covered 5 core areas of analysis. The first is the stakeholders. The second is the markets. The third is projects and initiatives. Fourth is technology landscape. And the fifth is impacts and the SDGs. 2 of these 5 core areas of analysis constitute what we call cross-cutting areas. Hence, they were treated as the same basically for both thematic areas. And you will find always an indication sort of with a color code, which parts relate to both and which are thematic area specific. So we have 141 countries in total. These are the 141 countries on the list provided by the OECD. We have 9 key industries, that have been identified that are particularly critical for those countries due to their contribution to GDP and the dependence on them, but also in terms of the emissions that they produce. And we had 20 key technologies which were identified as particularly important, set against the background of those key industries, but also in terms of the potential that they have, and because they fall within the right technology readiness level range. What does this mean? We're looking at technologies which already passed the proof of concept stage, but haven't been fully commercialized yet. So we would be talking about TRLs 4 to 7 mainly. What are the results? We have a comprehensive assessment grid that helped us to identify 28 focus countries. Then we have also thematic area specific findings relating to smart energy and industrial decarbonization specifically. We also have results on the cross-cutting themes, i.e. related to the stakeholders and the markets. We have a project database identified for those 28 deep dive countries. And finally, we also have provided 28 deep dives for each of those countries where we look in more depth at the landscape, the projects, the policy environment, and the like. Next, please. So, starting with the first cross-cutting theme, we identified 6 key stakeholder groups, which themselves can be broken down into further sub-stakeholder types, but to keep it at this higher level, we have 6. So that's innovators, adopters, controllers, funders, advisors, and influencers. Each of these stakeholders contribute in different ways to the innovation process. And moreover, each of these stakeholder groups is involved to a varying degree in the process across the maturity range. So while certain stakeholders may be highly involved from the early beginning on, such as innovators, which seems intuitive, others, including controllers, may actually play a more significant role as the technology matures. Another thing that is important to point out is that, of course, the relationship between innovators and adopters is marked by a collaborative approach. So innovators don't provide or come up with ideas in a vacuum, but they need to bear in mind what the needs of the actual adopters are. That also means understanding the situation and industry-specific needs. And in turn, adopters provide feedback to innovators that will guide their research and the implementation of those new technologies. We also looked at the key beneficiaries, and according to our study, those are to a large extent adopters and controllers. And while this is the same for both smart energy and industrial decarbonization, they do vary a little bit when we look at a more granular level. So in the context of smart energy, especially local communities and regions with poor access to energy, and also smaller local businesses are the main beneficiaries, while in the context of industrial decarbonization, large companies and emission-intensive sectors benefit the most, alongside the governments, as they help to support them in meeting their climate targets. All right, thank you. Next one, please. So, as mentioned, 28 deep dive countries were selected for the purposes of this assessment to provide a representative and relevant set of countries that inform the results. So you can see those 28 deep dive countries here. What we did was we looked at different factors, including economic performance, political stability, the maturity of the policy frameworks, access to clean energy, the ambition in the reduction of emissions in those countries. So basically, we checked to what extent those countries are fit and committed to decarbonization and enhancing energy efficiency. And on the other hand, we also wanted to make sure that the set is representative. So we have regional representation, but we also included different income levels to ensure that we have a fair set of countries in this set of deep dive countries. Next, please. So these factors that I have just mentioned, we understand them as the kind of enabling environment that is required in order for investments in technology innovation to be successful and to flourish. Of course, all the different countries vary across those different dimensions significantly. But as mentioned before, the countries that were selected cover those areas well. And moreover, we found further 5 high potential markets. These include South Africa, Mexico, India, Brazil, and Thailand. This is the case because we found that they have very strong policy frameworks oriented towards sustainability in place already, and ongoing efforts to reduce the cost of renewable energy technologies, and a concerted effort in meeting climate targets. However, what we did find is that while there is a rich policy landscape, most of them don't actually address the innovation or the promotion of technology innovation specifically. So this is definitely one of the key findings from the assessment. So we see a gap here. A further limitation that we see across different countries is the outdated infrastructure and the competitive pressures arising in global markets, where, of course, the investments also heavily depend on global supply chains. Next, please. These are the 9 key industries identified. Again, their relevance was determined based on their contribution to the economy of the countries in scope, but also in terms of the GHG emissions which they are accountable for. So as you can see in the case of, for example, aluminum, iron, and steel, and metallic products, those make up 45% of the gross value added to Kazakhstan. So almost half of the country's gross value added depends on those 3 sectors. Similarly, we can see that in the case of pulp and paper, in fact, 2 of the ODA recipient countries feature in the global top 10 producers. So that's Brazil and Indonesia. They depend heavily on pulp and paper, which is dependent, on the other hand, on heavy use of energy, but also water and raw materials. So the chemical emissions included here are very significant. Indonesia actually is one of the countries that features here in different industries. So you can also see them in power and utilities, but also in cement and concrete. This slide is really just designed to show you the urgency and the need for innovation in technology in order to ensure that these industries, which contribute massively to the economic performance in developing countries, can be maintained and at the same time emissions being driven down. Next slide, please. Now moving on to the actual technologies. As you can see, we started off with a very long list of more than 550 clean energy technologies across different technology readiness levels. Then we selected those that fall within the range 3 to 7. And then again, we deployed a technology assessment grid in which we considered factors such as affordability, technical feasibility, scalability, and the potential impact and the degree of innovation of the technologies in scope. Based on this, a shortlist was created, which was then again mapped against the countries and scope to see the relevance or to ensure that these technologies are relevant for the industries in those particular countries. So at the very end, we ended up with those 20 technologies, 10 for smart energy and 10 for industrial decarbonization in particular. We will now move on to the technology part in the context of smart energy, and I will hand over to Ruba to present this part. Thank you.
Thank you, Adela. So piggybacking on what Adela referred to and to show the landscape of technologies, 52 relevant smart energy technologies within the technology readiness level, range 3 to 7, were identified and assessed from the broader pool of around 200 technologies specifically targeting smart energy. So as we could see from the figure on the right, most of these technologies are currently in the post-conception phase with nearly 50% at the prototype or pilot testing stages. Now, the technologies in the TRL range from 6 to 7 are kind of interesting because they can offer certain benefits due to their advanced degree of maturity. You may ask why. It's because they have demonstrated their feasibility and their effectiveness in pilot projects. And therefore, this is important because it limits the technical and the financial risks. Now, such de-risking may be of particular relevance in developing countries, as Adela alluded to, because of the higher perceived risks when compared to developed nations. And I think additionally, governments and regulatory bodies are also typically more inclined to support the development of well-validated technologies, which can help create supportive policy frameworks and incentives, such as subsidies and tax benefits, because we see these as some of the major hurdles for these technologies to mature. So more mature technologies may also offer a quicker deployment compared to earlier stage innovations, leading to a faster realization of the kind of benefits they bring. Now, on the other hand, what we see, the figure on the left shows the grouping of the smart energy technologies into 5 technology groups, 4 of which are smart energy specific, as we could see, and 1 which covers both smart energy and industrial decarbonization, cross-cutting technologies. Why? Because those technologies are relevant to both thematic areas. If we can move to the next one, please. And here what we do, this slide shows the technology groups and their applications and focus regions. So I'm going to quickly just go over a high-level overview of those groups. So smart grid networks, they facilitate two-way communication and electricity flow from suppliers to end consumers. And they enable demand management, network protection, energy savings, and of course, cost reduction by the end of the day. These networks also support net metering mechanisms. So a good example would be for voltage source converters, and we will go into that in the following slides. Now, the next group is smart grid enablers, but from the infratech side. And these refer to infrastructure technologies that support smart grid deployment. So anything that has to do with the hardware, the communication protocols, sensors, monitoring systems, which we all know is extremely important to enable higher integration of renewables for any country. Now, smart grid enablers, but from the market mechanism side, it involves pricing models, demand response programs, and energy trading platforms. And these aim to optimize energy distribution, encourage efficiency, also enhance grid reliability. And a good example of that will be virtual power plants. And we will go into a little bit of details. What does that mean? As far as digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, and Internet of Things, all of those can help integrating the growing share of renewables into the existing infrastructure. And we're seeing a lot of newer technologies on a regular basis. When it comes to automation and artificial intelligence, these are important technologies because they can solve challenges related to rising power demand, efficiency, also changing supply and demand patterns. And last but not least, as for the technologies that fall under both thematic areas, these include anything from charging technologies like ultra-fast charging, and also tracking and monitoring technologies such as automated and connected vehicles. So what we could also see clearly here is that for smart energy, innovation is primarily focused on enhancing the robustness and the efficiency and the flexibility of the electric grid. And that's extremely important. Why? For the seamless integration, as I've mentioned, for variable renewable energy sources, but also for energy storage solutions. And we're seeing more of those coming online very rapidly. Now, our regional analysis indicated varied adoption patterns. So in Africa, for example, the focus is on partial grid upgrades and market mechanisms due to the limited infrastructure and capital available, with key projects such as smart grid networks in South Africa, for example. We're seeing a lot of grid stabilization in Tanzania. Whereas in Asia, it shows higher adoption of innovative technologies due to the better infrastructure infrastructure and supporting policies with ongoing projects, including more on the smart grid networks, for example, in Indonesia and India. Now, in the Americas, the EU and Oceania demonstrate significant activity in smart grid networks and also market-based mechanisms. We're seeing a lot of enhancements in projects, innovative projects in Brazil, in Panama, and that are focused on smart grid and fast charging infrastructure to resolve some of their ongoing challenges. I think with that, we can move to the next slide. And here what we're showing, as Adela alluded to, we started with the 550 technologies, and then we kind of ended up with 20, 10 for smart energy and 10 for industrial decarbonization. So what you see here are examples of these smart energy technologies, their TRL levels and the technology group classifications that we just discussed, along with their application. So I'm gonna just dive deeper into maybe one or two examples just to give you an idea. So for example, virtual power plants, we're seeing a lot of this, probably you've heard of that, but what does that mean? These are actually systems that integrate and manage a network of decentralized power generating units, such as solar panels or wind turbines, also energy storage systems, along with flexible consumers and demand response mechanisms. So by using advanced software and communication technologies, virtual power plants optimize the aggregated output and consumption of these distributed resources to function in a single power plant, enhancing grid reliability, that's the end goal, and also efficiency. And it empowers the integration of higher volumes of renewable energy sources. So again, this falls, as we could see, under smart grid enabling the market mechanisms, and the main uses for that is in the power and utilities sector. Now, if we can maybe discuss one more, I think the automated and connected vehicles is of interest to me personally. So these are advanced transportation systems that combine autonomous driving technologies with connectivity features. So automated vehicles use anywhere between cameras and sensors and artificial intelligence, of course, to navigate and operate without human interventions. While connected vehicles, they communicate with each other and the infrastructures and the external networks to enhance the safety, traffic management, and among other things. So together, these technologies, they aim to improve road safety, reduce traffic congestion, also enable new mobility services. And the same goes with the other 8 technologies that you see on the screen. So the bottom line here is that advancements in these technologies make energy infrastructure smarter and more connected, which significantly improve productivity and energy efficiency. And that's why we have seen a substantial uptake of these technologies in highly populated middle-income countries. India is a good example. And these countries are transitioning towards more advanced and connected electric grids. I think that's it for this slide. Good. So last but not least, what we're seeing here is the most smart energy projects are impacted by the technological and the environmental constraints. So a few messages that I want to highlight here. The first one is when it comes to smart energy. Energy utilities emerge as pivotal stakeholders, as we could see, 34%, acting as adopters and also implementers of technologies like the smart grids and the virtual power plants. But then when it comes to smart energy primary market constraints, we've alluded to some of those already, but the highly innovative nature of these technologies have introduced significant technological and political and legal constraints, primarily driven by privacy and security concerns. But despite these challenges, we could say that the majority of the smart energy projects are funded by government grants, as governments aim to foster projects that will catalyze further interest and investments from various stakeholders, followed by equity. And the last point here is that Among the smart grid technologies, market enabling mechanisms like virtual power plants that we've discussed are witnessing the most activity due to their cost effectiveness, their supportive characteristics for renewable energy and distributed technologies. And there is also substantial momentum towards upgrading to smart grids, motivated by growing need for flexibility and the integration of renewable energy sources into the grid. Adela, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ruba. So we did an analogous exercise for industrial decarbonization technologies. Altogether, we found 9 distinct groups, again, one of them being a cross-cutting one, covering both smart energy and industrial decarbonization relevant technologies. The other 8 cover carbon capture, utilization, and storage, chemical substitution, process substitution, alternative fuel production, heating and cooling, fuel cell-based technologies, industrial electrolysis, and electrification, especially in the context of transport. As you can see, carbon capture, utilization, and storage comprises 30 distinct technologies falling under it. So it's one that is on the one hand, very complex and comprehensive, but on the other hand, it's also the technology group that actually has received most of the attention, which we will see in a moment as well. So we have a few technologies further down the technology readiness level scale, with 20 at technology readiness level 3, and actually quite a strong concentration towards the prototype operational demo level. So we see quite a few advanced technologies in this field already. Being mindful of the time, let's jump to the next slides. And maybe I will not go through all of them in detail, but maybe pick out those that are particularly interesting, such as carbon capture, utilization, and storage, alternative fuel production, and also electrification. Why are these particularly interesting? They're interesting because, well, they are deemed to be particularly impactful. And on the other hand, they already have shown a quite distinct level of maturity. So they're the point of risk that Ruba already mentioned. Of course, the more mature the technology is, the less risk we can see. And this, of course, gives also a signal to those who finance or invest in those technologies and their further development. Another interesting technology is for sure process substitution, where basically the fundamental idea is to replace existing processes in industrial sectors that are very emission intensive with ones that are more sustainable and less emission intensive. Moving to the next slide. You can see also here the 10 distinct technologies. And as mentioned, carbon capture, utilization, and storage comprises different subcategories or sub-technologies. I think the most sort of important distinction is those that are pre-combustion and post-combustion. Currently, the post-combustion technologies are the more advanced and the most deployed ones. What is also quite interesting that while it's a technology that draws a lot of attention due to its potential for in the context of decarbonization, there's actually at the moment only about 20 commercial CCUS operations worldwide. At the moment, the USA, which of course is not a developing country, and also China are leading the way. And there's commitment to develop further CCUS plants in the future. One interesting case that we also see in Indonesia is the usage of CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. So CO2 is being injected into depleted oil fields to stimulate a further production, which otherwise would not have been possible. So CCUS is definitely a technology that has, again, drawn a lot of attention, but is still struggling because it's facing quite a number of issues. Amongst them is one that is basically the cost. So at the moment, the costs are approximately, or they range between 20 to 120 US dollars per ton of captured CO2. Another issue is, of course, the long lead times for the projects, which take between 6 to 10 years on average. And another critical issue is the question of cross-border transportation and lacking policy environments, which don't actually enable either the transportation or the storage itself, leaving aside the infrastructure question of having facilities and the geographic or geological conditions to actually store and transport the captured CO2. So this is definitely a technology that will further be up for discussion. And maybe to the next slide. Yeah, we've also seen in our analysis of existing projects that this is actually the one that draws the most attention and where there is a current focus on it. In the second place, we have process substitution, and in third place, we have alternative fuel production. What is also interesting is that it's mainly private organizations that are the primary stakeholders. So I think that's also good for future activities and research, how to stimulate the involvement of governments and also the integration of private-public partnerships. The main funding mechanism is actually grants and equity. And similarly, as in the case of smart energy solutions and technologies, as Ruba has said, is that technological
Sorry,
and
Adela.
Yes.
Regarding with the time limit, if you can accelerate a little bit for the
I need another 3 or 4 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And again, I think what's also interesting is that the funding range varies massively. So we found projects where funding was as little as $4,000 up to $765 million. Okay, so that was the technology specific part and the analysis. Now talking also about the role of impact. Essentially, there is the most transformational impact when economic, environmental, and social benefits converge. Those 3 dimensions can be further broken down into different categories. We deployed 6 as part of the market assessment. So in the context of environmental concerns, we looked at the commitment to decarbonization goals, the strong presence of heavy industry sectors, and the social dimension, high pollution and health burdens, and also high rural population rates. And in the economic dimension, the macroeconomic relevance of local SMEs, rapid industrial growth, and the presence of energy-intensive export sectors. So if these conditions are met, we can expect that the transformational impact or the potential for transformational impact is large. We picked out 2 examples, specific ones, and basically thought along the lines of a theory of change to show and see how they can actually contribute to the 3 focus SDGs, that is no poverty, industry, innovation, infrastructure, and climate action. Next, please. So based on the example of Kenya, where we have a very high rural population rate, which is at the level of 75%, and at the same time also a very strong and ambitious policy environment, we find conditions that basically make it like a good case for a strong transformational impact. And then we have dedicated project examples which show how the SDGs can be promoted. So for example, the Kenya Off-Grid Solar Access Project for underserved counties is dedicated to the implementation of mini-grids and standalone solar power systems. And they can help to, on the one hand, reduce energy poverty and overall poverty through affordable and clean energy access. On the other hand, they also help to strengthen resilience and the sustainability of energy infrastructure in rural and remote areas that are not connected to the main grid. And last but not least, they also help to mitigate climate change through the use of renewable energy and the reduction of GHG emissions. And then I will move to the final slide, which does something similar in the context of industrial decarbonization. So as I've already discussed, CCUS is a very interesting technology in the context of industrial decarbonization. And the Indian Oil Corporation Koyali Refinery project is a very interesting one, which shows, on the one hand, how big companies in the emission-intensive sectors can use this technology to stay in business, to stay relevant, while at the same time enhance their environmental impact, and hence also promote SDG 13, i.e. climate action. And that is it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adela and Ruban. Because Ruban was coming afterwards, I forgot to introduce. She's from KPMG US and other director. And after the exciting presentation, there are some interesting questions around the chat. And I want to ask you first, Adela, about the smart energy technology innovations. You mentioned a lot of interesting ones. For example, the smart grid network, smart grid enablers on market mechanism or digital technologies. So what the most interesting smart technologies found by the developing countries, like they are most being attracted and deployment, and what's the reason behind this?
Excellent. Thank you very much. Also, Ruba, if you want to add, then of course you as our smart energy expert will be in the best position. From the findings of the assessment, I think it's quite clear that really smart energy and everything related to smart energy is of particular interest and particular relevance. We see that this is where most of the projects are focused on now. I think virtual power plants in particular are very interesting and will also attract more investment and attention in the future. And I think that it's especially in those areas that are far off from the main grid, they will play a critical role, not just for basically industry, but also for rural communities, also for private households, for local small and medium enterprises. So I think this is where the future lies when it comes to smart energy technologies.
If I may add, Adela, we're also
Sure.
seeing, the ultra-fast charging. So these are the advanced systems designed to, significantly reduce the time required to charge electric vehicle batteries, because these are up, on the rise, and that's why the ultra-fast charging technologies are now following, and a lot of R&D money is being funneled that way. And basically what they offer is achieving 80% charge in 20 minutes or less.
Okay, thank you, Adele and Ruban. So for the second question is, from the policymaker perspective, how do you think they can improve in accelerating the clean energy technology, such as like smart energy or industry decarbonization, especially for the most innovative ones, and considering the developing country situations?
That's a really interesting one. And the answer is going to be, in one way, very simple. And I think it's basically to basically include it in the policy frameworks. As we've mentioned, there is very little. So while there is a rich policy landscape in many countries, there is very little policy actually dedicated to the promotion, the research, and also the funding for technology innovation specifically. So I think it's really about integrating it into the policy frameworks, first of all. Secondly, making sure and being engaged in establishing or being interested in the right financing mechanisms. And third, also teaming up with private organizations, because the governments by themselves will need that sort of exchange. As we've seen at COP, or one of the outcomes from COP is that there is an immense need for climate finance. So basically the private and the public sector will be required to join forces to push forward the policy agenda and to enable it by having the right kind of instruments in place.
Yeah, so following your answer on how the public and the private sector should collaborate with each other, so there are also questions around how the companies, like the private sectors, because when they engaging with this kind of frontier technologies, when considering about the regulatory burdens or emissions they can reduce, and about the innovation type, how do you think the firms, the companies, they can balance the technology, for example, the readiness level or their current developed status, against with the general regulatory burden or regulatory supporting, and also the emission reduction side?
This is a
I hope
very
I hope I delivered the question for the audience.
Well, I will answer it the way I understood it. So, what should come, or what can they do? I think it's to be honest, very, very difficult. I think first of all, and that's maybe again also more an answer to the previous question, but I think one thing that will help the companies, if there's a certain degree of policy stability and predictability. So when companies are in a dynamic environment where there is a lot of policy changes, it's difficult to keep up, and it's also tied in with sort of constant change and adaptation processes. So I think for the companies, there's a little bit of a limitation as to what they can do. So I think it's really important to, of course, follow and anticipate the regulatory changes and the requirements, especially when it comes to reporting. I think especially for markets outside of the EU, it's important to monitor what is happening in the EU, because it's developing a lot of sustainability policy that also affects them. And to anticipate also the major markets that they are exporting to see what the regulatory changes imply for their business. So I think it's really and trying to identify if there are already existing good practices and how to deal with it. But I think it's mainly about anticipating what's going to happen across the globe in those markets that are relevant, and deriving best practices or leading practices that are already out there.
Thank you, Adele and Ruba. And do you have further comments to the audience? Otherwise, I can hand over back to Peter for closure. Peter?
Thanks, Della. Thanks, Yves. Just checking if we've got any more questions submitted, but I think you've covered the majority of them, and I think what we can also do is, if anyone has any questions as well over the coming days, please do submit them to the A2D Facility at unida.org mailbox, and we can also get back to you. But if there's no sort of further questions, then just to say that the full report is obviously available on the website, and that goes into a lot more detail, of course. This is a really nice summary that Adele and Ruba have done of what is a very detailed, comprehensive and high quality report that can be really useful for informing decisions, project development, programming and future activities in developing country contexts. So do engage with that. There is also an executive summary as well, if you want a short version of it. That will also be available in Spanish and French. That's not quite available yet, but it will come in the coming week or so on the website. So again, just to say also, as I said at the start, we have a couple of other market assessments that you also might be interested in looking at, which are in the same place on that website. And of course, you've got questions on those, feel free to send them through. So we had one on clean hydrogen, innovation in developing countries, and one on critical minerals, innovation in developing countries. So I think with that, we can close, and just to say thanks again to Adela, Ruba and the KPMG team for doing a great job on this really important report. And please do, get in touch if you have any questions. So with that, we can close. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.